Hi, and welcome to another Austin Software Cooperatives meetup. This is August 2022's meetup on a book review of The Age of Surveillance Capitalism by Shoshana Zuboff. And we're going to take a look at a mind map that Watson's put together, going over the different topics and aspects, have a little discussion about that. And we can look at next month's meetup. Watson?
Thank you. All right. All right. So we have Shoshana Zuboff, Age of Surveillance Capitalism. This book is pretty big, so we might need to do two stabs at this. So let's get right into it. There's definitely some things I'd like to try to cover as quickly as possible, because there's a lot of history here that's relevant and a build-up. So the second half of the book I found to be a little bit more exciting to me, because I'm kind of familiar with some of the first half, but there's definitely things in here that I was not aware of. Let's get into the first chapter, which is really an introduction to the book. So the very beginning, Shoshana goes over, reviews the old smart home concept called Aware Home. And she contrasts this with Google Nest. So the old smart home concept, intuitively, you may remember we're going to have smart thermostats and so on and so forth, be able to turn your lights on and off. And you may have purchased certain things that may do some of those things. You may have a Amazon that does some of those, Echo or what have you, that does some of those things, and different additions to the Echo that allows you to do that. Well, originally, the Aware team wanted to use these devices in the home to empower the person in the home. Well, one of the things that they had as a tenet of the kind of the ideology and belief system of the Aware Home was it's a private sanctuary of those who dwell within its walls. Well, when it started coming to Google Nest and some of the new ways of wiring your home up, started noticing a little bit is odd. She's using this contrast to show us that you're not in control of your data, and it's maybe worse than what you would think. So first thing is the licensing agreement with, say, Google Nest is pretty draconian, and they have terms that are in there that say we're not responsible for anything that we do or what happens to your data and all this stuff like that. There was an analysis of the Nest policy, and this, gone over a couple times in the book. But you would need in order to really review the privacy policy, you would have to go over 1,000 contracts. So this is one of the techniques of what she calls surveillance capitalism, is to make it a burden to even resist being surveilled. So by 2018, the assumptions of the aware home were gone with the wind, and that's kind of the lead up for the book. But contrasting these things where, for me, they were intuitive, like a smart home, so on and so forth. You would think the way that your smart home, the equipment that you're purchasing for it, you would think that the way that the equipment manufacturers were making money was through your purchase. And Google Nest and Amazon Ring and all these stuff, the way that they make their money is through the surveillance capitalism, really. So, what is surveillance capitalism? Surveillance capitalism unilaterally claims human experience as a free raw material for translation into behavioral data. Although some of these data are applied to product or service improvement, the rest are declared as proprietary behavioral surplus fed into advanced manufacturing processes known as machine intelligence and fabricated into prediction products that anticipate what you will do now, soon, and later. Finally, these prediction products are traded in a new kind of marketplace for behavioral predictions that I call behavioral futures markets. So that's a mouthful, but it's more than, the big part of this book is it's more than just selling your data, because that's what people think. That's what I thought. They sell your data. I didn't know Google sold your data, but we knew that Google made money from AdWords. Okay, fine. But they really are selling what you're going to do. All right. See what else. At its core, surveillance capitalism is parasitic, self-referential, and it revives Karl Marx's old image of capitalism as a vampire that feeds on labor, but with an unexpected turn. Instead of labor, surveillance capitalism feeds on every aspect of every human's experience. So you are creating valuable things, and someone else is harvesting them, taking them, those things, and you don't get a say in what happens to it. One of the arguments in the book is that surveillance capitalism is the model for most internet businesses, most when it's talking about apps that you install on your phone and things that you'll, the most popular sites that you might use on the internet, like Instagram or Snapchat or something like that. Okay, so here's a counterintuitive piece. We are not surveillance capitalism's customers, although the saying tells us if it's free, you are the product. So that's what I've always heard. You are the product. He's saying that this is incorrect. We are the sources of surveillance capitalism's crucial surplus, the objects of technology, of a technology advanced and increasingly inescapable raw material extraction operation. Surveillance capitalism's actual customers are the enterprises that trade in its markets for future behavior. Surveillance capitalism operates through unprecedented asymmetries in knowledge and the power that accrues to knowledge. Surveillance capitalists know everything about us, whereas their operations are designed to be unknowable to us. All right. So that's going to be a reoccurring thing in the book. They know what we do, but we don't know what they do with our data. I see it kind of has a formula for this later on. Hopefully we get to it. So some of this may sound trivially true, except for that prediction part. I think that that's deceptive. That's not something that I kind of figured about or knew about. So surveillance capitalism is not a technology, it is a logic that imbues technology and commands it into action. Surveillance capitalism is a market form that is unimaginable outside of the digital milieu, but is not the same as the digital. This is something I think that's a big thrust of the book, is most people that you'll talk to, is there's kind of what she calls an inevitability of technology. Gonna happen, just accept it, kind of thing. And she kind of has a rebuttal for that. She really doesn't accept that. First couple of chapters, she goes into a couple different, say, philosophers, economists, historians that try to push back on that, and say that technology, it's really a tool, and surveillance capitalism, that's the beneficiaries of surveillance capitalism want to tell you it's inevitable and it is a tool and you should just let it happen. Whereas the way that they architect it. And she is saying, no, there are all types of contingent things that happen that were conscious decisions, people in power, of the technology. And of course, it just so happens to be that they get the benefit and you get exploited, kind of thing. So surveillance capitalism is a logic in action that, and not a technology, is a vital point, because surveillance capitalists want us to think that their practices are inevitable expressions of the technologies that they employ. We have the CEO, Eric Schmidt of Google, saying that the reality is that search engines, including Google, do retain this information for some time, talking about your data. But she pushes back. In truth, search engines do not retain, but surveillance capitalism is the thing that retains. Schmidt's statement is a classic misdirection that bewilders the public by conflating commercial imperatives and technological necessity. So he's talking about, there's a formula that she has when there's any type of pushback that I definitely want to get to, that's followed when it comes to your data and surveillance capitalism. And this is a part of it. This misdirection is one of the stages. One of the things kind of interesting in statement from Apple is that they would have some marketing that would say that they don't really they respect your privacy. I always thought that was odd. But Shoshana Zuboff says that they kind of do, at least at the time of the writing of this book, but not in the way that I would have thought, in the way of this predictive analysis that's being done. It's kind of not their business. They really do operate in a traditional, you're buying a piece of equipment and some software, and they're not making money off of your data. I found that to be refreshing, but I don't know how true it is now. Another counterintuitive thing that she points out.
To get an update on that. What is
yeah.
it? How is it now? I mean, there's a lot coming out recently, as far as data and privacy. And I am seeing Apple on some of those things. So a deeper analysis over all of it would be maybe a nice. I don't know if there's a paper or anything that we could follow up with, but could be good maybe.
Yeah, it would be nice. There's some things that she points out that it seems like it. Well, we'll get to it, but there's some. Basically, there's a portion of the book or a section where she talks about like kind of a brain drain of everybody that's into predictive analysis, statistics, AI, machine learning, and these companies take all of that resource, and it seems like Apple's not taking it, and it's not a thing that you can just casually hire. So it's affected even academia because there's no one to teach the field. And we probably won't get to it, but there's a guy that writes a book, Artificial Intelligence, the Paradigms of Artificial Intelligence. And people argue that is the top 3 best books on computer programming in general, just about computer programming, regardless of artificial intelligence or not. Peter Norvig is the author. It's a book that I read a while ago. Really cool book. Just those techniques aren't really used anymore, but just for seeing it kind of tells you that artificial intelligence is hard, shows you, and it uses the programming language Lisp. But he's pretty much a rock star, and the guy just disappeared. And familiar with him, but in the 90s and stuff, he's just gone. Okay, got hired at Google. Well, I mean, it's just odd that someone that would be that influential would just not have. You see him arguing with Noam Chomsky over language recognition and stuff. And that was it. And it's really, this is why they have all of these draconian rules of secrecy that the people that were in that field, they can't really write papers or talk about anything. They can file a patent. That's it. Very bizarre to see someone like that. I thought it was odd that he's just gone. That's just invisible. So that's and you would think that Apple, bringing it back to Apple, I haven't heard of them having that group of elite individuals within that space. So maybe they do though. Oh yeah, so traditional controls for capital, which is break up the monopolies, ensure that there's competition and all that. She's saying that's not going to work because if you break up Google, break up Facebook, all you're going to do is just have a whole bunch of surveillance capital, and you might make it worse with having a bunch. So you really need to address with regulation. What she talks about in the book is they are very sophisticated in dealing with regulation. I think we're going to see some of that in this next chapter. So any questions so far or comments?
I was just trying to look up a little bit and came across something that happened with Facebook where they banned or removed access for distributing custom apps internally and other stuff. And the article ended up talking about how it was a flex of their contract law muscles with privacy as a secondary thing versus a focus on actual privacy, and what they could have done to like say, no, Facebook is doing terrible things, so we're not going to allow Facebook at all on the platform, like no Facebook Messenger or any other apps. At least it's a claim that it's a misdirection and not actually moving forward in privacy. But it made me think of what we were talking about earlier as far as like the misdirections and stuff, to get away from what is the actual issues on how we need to protect privacy.
Yeah. Facebook they have they're their own. Google and Facebook are the two titans. Facebook is their own unique beast. They themselves, and then them selling the data. I haven't seen in here Google selling data. I think they're pretty greedy. They buy companies who have already trained up models or what have you. But Facebook would share data, and people really created some terrifying things based off of the stuff that was shared. And it's kind of funny, Facebook initially, Zuckerberg kind of saying, that's no big deal. It's not going to really make us any money. And he caught on later, and it became a focus. And he somehow, well, I say somehow, this kind of bothers me, but Sheryl Sandberg, the Lean In lady, who, I read her book and I thought that was a good, book and everything. It's part of this whole surveillance capitalism thing. I think she brought that to Facebook. So I think we'll get to that. I think I got that correct.
Does it talk about Alphabet Inc. And when we're talking about like companies, and you're saying Google and Facebook, but it's not really Google. Google is.
Yeah, she talks about Alphabet. Or
yeah.
She could say Alphabet. Yeah. When they reconfigured Alphabet, is a whole bunch of predictive analysis companies that with varying levels of nefariousness. All right, so Google, interesting thing of this chapter, first chapter, or chapter 2, sorry. Google was, doing their thing over in Spain, and Spain wasn't having it. So Spanish citizens asserted their right to a human future when they challenged Google by demanding the right to be forgotten. The milestone alerted the world to how quickly the cherished dreams of a more just and democratic digital future were shading into nightmare. and it foreshadowed a global political contest over the fusion of digital capabilities and capitalist ambitions. And we'll get into that some more. But yeah, they brought them to court, and we'll get to it. So I guess Shoshana or Zuboff, I'll just say Zuboff. One of the great, I think, things of the book is the authors and the prominent figures she draws from. So Emil Durkheim is, people call him the father of sociology. I have to say, when I was reading this book, I was definitely not expecting, this is a rigorous book. I was not expecting that. She, lots of references, and I guess she's a psychologist, so I guess I should have looked her up. But there's a view that one of the ideas that she draws on is this division of labor that you may, intuitively or popularly, of division of labor is, do a very specific thing, and a specialization, and you can have efficiencies. So think of it as assembly line, you're turning a wrench, and someone else is, you're making a car, someone else puts the tarp on the top of the car, something like that, and everybody's faster. Emil Durkheim has a book, Division of Labor, which is completely not what you would think it would be about. I read that book, it was 15 years ago or so. But that book has a lot to say about solidarity and why people come together. And that's why I was reading it. And she draws on that and saying that the real effects of capital, what Emil Durkheim noticed, is the social side and the causes. So we kind of think of efficiencies, or I'm sorry, I said we, but economists might think of efficiencies as the cause, and the sole only important thing that's happening when you have a division of labor and all this stuff like that, and as the reasoning behind the division of labor and all that stuff. But Emil Durkheim comes through and says, no, it's really the social side that is the major driver. And he has a whole, it's a pretty big book, so there's a lot to go into there. But she draws on division of labor and says, and then draws a concept where she says, like, there's a division of learning. So when you have a division of labor, some people can figure out certain techniques that might not be as valuable. Some might have more valuable techniques, and then they get into that mode, and there could be some, there could be some inequalities. There could be all kinds of things that come from that. Well, division of learning, same thing. There can be some inequalities that come from that, and that's kind of one of her formulas, is talking about who is it that knows about your data, who can decide what gets done with the data, and so on and so forth. So she draws on him and builds on that. See here, so we got the neoliberal. What I definitely want to get to is it's kind of the defense system, the predictive analysis and the defense system. So I'm going to start moving a bit faster here. So she's drawing on some of the, you could call them the fathers of neoliberalism. So Hayek, so on and so forth. They start talking about shareholder value movement. There's a concept in here that I wasn't familiar with, where she's saying that the old concept of corporations, and Jensing and Meckling were the ones kind of outlining this in an article and kind of bashing it. So the old concept was the manager kind of a little bit more friendly to society in general and workers, but society in general, which that's not a thing that I would have thought. And this shareholder value, theory of value, this is what broke that. And so this is a neoliberal creation from the 70s, which is that managers are now going to be in a where they're going to be graded based on their performance, and part of that performance is going to be profit motive. So they're kind of really focusing on profit motive even more than before. And so she says here, you don't do well, the barbarians at the gate are going to take your job, kind of thing. Let's see here. All right, so I'm going to go over this a little bit. So just high level, Carl Polanyi wrote about these kind of, summarizing, there's countervailing forces, always within capital. You have the New Deal. That was a countervailing force to labor, just basically, capital just basically exploiting labor. And so you have unions that do things that force worker compensation, factory inspection, and all these child labor, all this stuff. So Polanyi calls it the double movement and says that that's always important for capital and is what even allowed capital to function. And let's go past some of this. Basically, the idea is that double movement was removed by neoliberals. So that's what the neoliberals did. And part of that double movement is regulation, and surveillance capitalism is very hostile to regulation. So it fits right in with neoliberal. So that's why you don't have as much checks and balances coming from government side, because people are neoliberal. All right. This is I did not get all the way through this book. This is a huge book. This Capital in 21st Century. See, I got the Nobel Prize though, Thomas Piketty. And basically this is a big thing, and maybe just intuitive to people here. The rate of return on capital tends to exceed the rate of economic growth. So R is greater than G. Basically, capital is going to continue. The rich are going to get richer, the poor are not going to, get better economic growth. You would think that wouldn't be as big of a deal, but this is a rigorous presentation of it. And so let's go back, and that relates to what she calls the second modernity. Let's see if we can get through some of this. We got Google Gmail. You'll be familiar with that. Facebook Beacon. And this is basically the beginning of surveillance capitalism, the beginning of going forward, but basically the first stage is to perform an incursion, to go into a place that no one's been before and just start taking stuff. You can call it the simple robbery. And doing that, it's kind of it's better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. It's that situation. So Facebook did launch a beacon and said, all your data is getting sold, everything. And somebody basically had an engagement, and I guess their spouse knew about it or whatever. and they were upset. It became a big thing. They said sorry, but we're going to continue to do it anyways, whatever. But they learned, they started doing this model of how they deal with privacy. But then they start putting privacy policies again. This is the thing to make you, this concept of consent. You basically can't read the privacy policies. It takes 76 work days to read the privacy policies. So just no way. If everyone did it, the country would lose $780 billion. Let's leave this alone. All right, so now Spain. The Spanish Data Protection Agency, they brought them to court. Google was fighting them. They each all had, very unique claims. Basically, court, they won. But here's some insights. So Google sneered at the decision. They characterized Google co-founder Sergey Brin as joking and dismissive. Page defended Google's unprecedented information power with an extraordinary statement suggesting that people should trust Google more than democratic institutions. So this is a recurring theme. Government is bad. Government is inefficient. And here you trust. So you should trust private more than government. So this is what kind of the arguments internally that's happening. But Spain, there's a limit on how much data or how long the data stays around. And I want to say, someone was saying that, I didn't notice it, but you go to Spain, you get to a different site than when you go to Gmail, you have to go to a specific site. And now let's see if we can get through here. This is a history on Google. I want to get, because we're getting up around the hour, we're gonna have to split this thing into two. There's some things later in the book that are just like breathtaking, but let's see. The interesting thing about them learning about how to make money, they were pushed into making money. It was an emergency. They at first were, Google was very much kind of trying to be that white knight. They didn't want to, they wanted the search to be pure. They didn't want it to be affected by advertising. They had that in their initial statutes and all this. And it was, they were getting eaten alive. They had investors, so on and so forth. And it came down to that profit motive. And so they started seeing some of these with Google AdWords, so on and so forth. They started seeing some opportunities for what she calls behavioral surplus. So, and then to go back, the whole concept of behavioral surplus. So, as we say, it's the same idea of surplus. If you have a bunch of workers, they make 6 chairs, and they go to sell the chairs. If the cost of the, or let's just go say, I'm sorry, they make chairs and it costs $6, right? And they go to sell the chairs and they make $10, right? The company makes $10. That $4 is a surplus. That's one way to look at it. And The people who help to create the widgets or the chairs, they don't get any say in where that $4 goes, then that's exploitation. So the concept of the book or surplus, and she's using some of those words, it really is saying you are part of that creation of what was being sold. It's your experiences and your data. So it's your experiences that were rendered, so on and so forth. And you don't get a say in where it goes, but you contributed to it. Framed by Google as what they call data exhaust or other names, that really play with what it is. It's like your waste. You don't care about it, so one person's garbage is another person's gold or what have you. But people want to have a say in their data, but you can't. So this is important. The whole secret side of Google. Look at this. So secrecy came to be institutionalized in the policies and practices that govern every aspect of Google's behavior. Once Google's leadership understood that commercial power of behavioral surplus, Schmidt instituted what he called the hiding strategy. Google's employees were told not to speak about what the patent had referred to as novel methods, apparatus, message formats, so on and so forth, or confirm any rumors about it. So I was talking about a patent up earlier, or way up here. But there's a patent that talks about all the ways to extract and value, and that some of the pushback is going to be privacy, right? So we'll go back to it. Douglas Edwards writes compelling about this predicament. Page and Brin were hawks, insisting on aggressive data capture and retention. Larry opposed any path that would reveal our technological secrets or stir the privacy pot and endanger our ability to gather data. Page wanted to avoid arousing users' curiosity by minimizing their exposure to any clues about the reach of the firm's data operations. He questions the prudence of electronic scroll in the reception lottery that displays a continuous stream of search queries. And he tried to kill the annual Google Zeitgeist conference that summarizes the year's trends and search trends. So that's how much they really figured out, let's not let anyone know what we're doing here. Okay, Google discovered that we, as in Google, are less valuable than others' bets on our future behavior. This changed everything. Well, we as in everyone. But she really calls it a predictive analysis, like a futures market. So what someone's going to do is what people are trying to buy. I should have highlighted this. So Taylor, you know how many times somebody says that they want to do, oh yeah, we're gonna have like 40,000 hits per second. It's kind of like, that's what Google was doing in 2017. You're not gonna do that. So stop it. I found that to be funny.
Yeah.
Oh man. All right. So I am going to force my way over to all of this stuff is fun, but we need to get to this dispossession cycle because that is kind of the most important part, first part of this book. So we're on discovery. This is chapter 3, the moat. Yes. Going to the moat. Oh yes, these Hannah Arendt is a real good. Need to make it through her stuff, but about totalitarianism. All right. There's a lot of good stuff here. All right, so social theorist David Harvey builds on Hannah Arendt's insight with the notion of accumulation by dispossession. What accumulation by dispossession does is to release a set of assets very low and in some instances zero cost. Right, overaccumulated capital can seize hold of such assets and immediately turn them into profitable use. He adds that entrepreneurs who are determined to join the system and enjoy the benefits of capital accumulation are often the ones who drive this process of dispossession into new undefended territories. All right, so let's see if we can find this cycle. This. So she goes into purchasing frenzy of all of these models and data, raw data that Facebook and Google are doing, and this is simply to train their models. So WhatsApp, although they're trying to say that they don't save your, text and stuff, it is very suspect. All right, they plenty of arguments talking about government is too slow, democracy is too slow, and it's kind of a two sides to that. There's the opportunity of going into some place. He kind of talks about Christopher Columbus and says, okay, look, this is what he went into some some different islands, started exploiting the people there, and had these declarations of, hey, the queen is now in charge here. And it's kind of this concept of, because there really isn't anyone to establish law or has more power than us, kind of thing here, then the idea is that as people start to respond to your rules that you declare, those become the laws. So you do this thing you could call an incursion, and that's your first stab, and then you kind of, I would say, like, kind of clean up the mess afterwards. So this whole asking for forgiveness. But the other side of that is saying that, so really this area, this unregulated space, is everything that government can't deal with. So right now, or within this context, surveillance capitalism. So I'm summarizing this portion. There's lots of examples of Google and Facebook vigorously lobbying to kill online privacy protection, limit regulations, weaken and block privacy. There's a revolving door between Google and the Washington, even the CIA, which is striking. And so this idea of they learned how to manage regulations, government, and also academia. There was a lot of funding the types of research for privacy, so on and so forth, that would benefit them. And so very interesting that she outlined that a lot of the different groups like ALEC that you would think they're neoliberal organizations, and you could say it's 60% of Republicans and 40% of Democrats are part of it. It's really neoliberal in general, stuff like that. But you would see like Koch brothers are part of this organization, but Google is also part of this organization. And it's within these contexts, Google is decisively neoliberal, which is bringing it back to the context we were saying earlier. So that is really, then she goes into a history of that. Too much time. 10 more minutes. Yeah, so going back to the neoliberal legacy, what I was just describing. So this free speech fundamentalism, a lot of the pushback when it comes back to an ethics of why should we be allowed to capture your data, it goes with First Amendment, and people should be allowed to say what they want, and we should be allowed to collect it. Odd, but yeah. FTC, there's some history here with FTC that they had they tried to fight, they tried to regulate a bunch of things, and there's a history there where she goes and says before 9/11 there were some questions that were brought up for lots of different privacy things. 9/11 happened, and it really privacy became a lower priority, essentially. So they rode that wave and pushed back on a lot there. Yeah, then she goes into the collaboration between CIA, and there's a lot of ties between CIA and Google as far as data sharing, so on and so forth. So she calls that exceptionalism. Let's get out of here. Definitely a 2-session book. All right, so what do we got? Fortifications. Yeah, really going again, they learned how to go up against the government side. So electoral politics, deliberately blurring the public and private interests through relationships of aggressive lobbying and activities, revolving door of personnel who migrated between Google and the Obama administration, united by elective affinities during Google's crucial growth years of 2009 to 2016. And Google's intentional campaign of influence over academic work and the larger cultural conversation, vital to policy formation, public opinion, and political perception. So this is a lot of their flexing and how they really grew up learning at this time, and didn't really, I mean, if you're from the narrative of a good capitalist, they really learned in a time when they could have been kind of taken apart by regulation and so on and so forth. People could have made a name on, hey, you're trying to do all these privacy violations, but they really learned quickly on how to, whereas, how to, the ins and outs of lobbying and so on and so forth, whereas other companies taken forever to learn about that stuff. There's a whole portion in here about how for predictive analysis that Google was using, how they started using that to help the 2008 campaign. So they were a big part of that, and that's what it was saying about the revolving door, because some of those people went to Google and back and forth. And let's get out of here. Yeah, it's talking about the academic side. Lots of money flowing there. Here we go. Here we go. This is it. So from a high level, the abstraction imperative, let's look at that first. So yeah, so kind of a context. So in 2008, they asked Schmidt, why do you have 150 products? And he's responding and saying, oh, yeah, Google's product is customer satisfaction. Customers are the world's advertisers and those who pay for the predictions. Customer satisfaction therefore equates to Google's dominant market share in lucrative new behavioral futures markets. That in context of that is like, why would they come out with something and just throw it out there? It looks like they spent a bunch of money on weird things like Google Plus, so on and so forth. Their end goal was what she describes as these supply chains. They're just trying to create supply chains of data. So everything from Google Fiber, whatever, the phones, Android phone, all of it is only for predictive analysis. And they do the numbers and say, let's go. And so that's it. That's really the goal behind it. Whereas I thought that they were coming out with products so that someone else wouldn't kind of impede their collection of data. But that doesn't really make sense with some of the products that they were getting into. It just seemed like they were even brand new markets they were going to, and say it's not really that they want to get there first, it's they just want, if someone else does a good job, it seems like they leave them alone. If it's not a good job, or if it's something brand new and it's not happening fast enough, they jump right into it. And it just drives everything. Weird stuff. Edge cases like Google came out with the compiler for JavaScript and then put that into Chrome, and it became a best, like, what is all this? That's just really a weird edge case. You want people to be, having a seamless experience, customer satisfaction. What are you saying there? Seamless experience as they're giving up their data. That's really the driver. So I won't even open this up. And so the idea is they want to corner markets of data. So there's a dispossession cycle. And this is the argument here. This might be the first really important chapter of the book to me that is, and it's eye-opening. So the whole idea with this, we saw that they want to have your data, they want to, and it's not just this, the whole model for new internet companies is to eventually take the data, train up the data so that they can do prediction, or to make a model or have a bunch of data so that a prediction analysis company will buy you, kind of thing. So the friction that could stop you from getting there is privacy. And so that's where all of these cycles come in, and these were learned from the beginning. So Gmail was the first one Beacon for Facebook was their first one, and likes, Facebook likes. That's what these were all about. So we'll do a tie. Dispossession is initiated by a unilateral incursion into undefended space, your laptop, your phone, your web page, street you live on, so on and so forth. Incursion is when dispossession operations rely on virtual capabilities to kidnap virtual surplus. So this is an analogous to someone going into a new, like a pioneer or a robber baron or so on and so forth. It could be people in this space, but you have ways of trying to force your will on these people, different varying ways of violence. There's lots of examples of, it's interesting. She gave an example of the Christopher Columbus and some of these other groups. They'll go in and they have these declarations that they were supposed to say out loud to the natives. If you resist us, this will happen to you. We're claiming this for the queen, all that. And it became so matter of fact that they were supposed to do these declarations. They would just mumble them to themselves on the way to killing people. Like before they wouldn't even just say it. They wouldn't even say them. It was just dot an I, cross a T kind of thing. We're going to say it. It doesn't matter. They're not going to listen to it. They don't even speak English. But this idea of doing an incursion and setting up shop is the first stage. And there's having some type of legitimacy, even though it's, just really laughable. Examples of resistance. The second stage is habituation. Lawsuits and investigators unwind the tedious space of democratic institutions. Google continues the development of its contested practices with higher velocity. FTC, so on and so forth. The third stage of the cycle. Let me go ahead and go into these. So we've got incursion. I want to say, so Street View. Oh, there's a great incursion example is Street View. I heard of this, but it wasn't really, I missed it. But they were basically hacking people's wireless routers as the Google cars were going through, and they were capturing the data. They were saying, oh, we're not. It was just, and if your access point was open, we just logged it. Then it became, oh, we were sniffing the data. And it became they had people's passwords and all that stuff. And then it became that the person that said all this stuff was like a notorious hacker that is a war dialer, an old school hacker or whatever. And it was his idea and all this stuff like that. And FTC tried to fight him on that, and they ended up paying something ridiculously small, like $2 million of fine in the end. And it took a long time for them to get all that done. The Germans weren't having it, and they punished them, but United States. So they were doing that everywhere, not just here. Unique experience. The engineer selected a unique experience in Wi-Fi war driving. And then FCC found evidence that contradicted them, and then they punished them, but it was a slap on the wrist, essentially. Let's go into habituation. So this habituation is kind of like a drawing out of the violations of the incursion, let's say. So they just drag their feet with responding. They were outright just not even responding to FTC or FCC or FTC, either one. and like $7 million fine. They're like, yeah. Two key elements: habituation. The simple fact that the elapsed time between the Street View's initial incursion in 2007 and 2010 scandal and the 2012 conclusion and the 2013 conclusion of the state's investigation, right? It takes a long time, and it's getting people used to what's going on. And then they adapt. So they start adapting to whatever rulings are going out. So what this is, it's always a letter. Oh, we're sorry, we didn't know, and we're going to. And they're always, instead of regulation, they're going to write it to where it's, we will change our internal policies. We are investigating this, so on and so forth. This is copied by everybody now. So this is the adaptation to the response of the incursion, and then the drawing out. Then you come up with these. We're sorry, but we didn't do anything wrong, but we're sorry. That kind of thing, and they pledge to reform, and they do no such thing. And then this redirection. So this has to do with after the incursion, you find kind of like a mini market or a new market, or where the resistance is the least, that kind of thing. And it's kind of, you did an experiment on the public, and then you start going to the direction where you really want to go. Right. So this is the model that makes you dispossess your data. So, and it's really striking that they will show something that seemed, and I remember, so Gmail, oh yeah, they're scanning your stuff, by the way. What? And then you get used to it. And this is what they learned. And this stage, they talk about it in like opaque language. Someone will come out with a product, some engineer or whatever, and then someone will ask them about it, and they say, oh yeah, it's going through this in and out stage of where people accept it or they don't understand it. And they'll talk about it. They kind of, this is our representation of it, but they kind of know that these are the stages that you have to do in order to get people to dispossess their privacy. And then other people learn, like Facebook, so on and so forth. Like, oh, the whole section here, Google Glass. So Google Glass came out, and this is a good example of redirection. So Google Glass came out, there was pushback when they found out there was a bunch of people recording. Then they redirected it to be used inside of warehouses, and then they go back and say, okay, we're going to make it to where this is seamless and people don't even know that it's less intrusive, kind of thing. And so that redirection portion is a big part of that. And it's a Facebook like button they learned at the same time. And the siren song is going into how everybody started copying them. A big part of the people copying Google is the proliferation of Google employees leaving and going to other companies, starting their own company. So this whole model gets, which includes secrecy, there's a whole section of the secrecy part, gets proliferated in Silicon Valley to show people how to make money off this model. So I think we've gone over, so I think that's it for now. We definitely need to get in another session, get to this, make them dance with the, I've said that to some of you all. They can predict your big five personality psychological score better than a professional interviewer, a therapist. And there's all kinds of things you can do with that. So the prediction stuff works. My point. So it is scary. It works. They're selling it, and the final move is this make them dance, what she calls instrumentation. It's not just to get you to buy stuff. That's it, but it's also a top-down dystopian future kind of thing. So that you can imagine. But any questions, comments? What did people think? Whoever looked at things.
It's both interesting and scary.